Again, I'm Luminara. I started Autism Transformed as a way to help kids recover from autism. I work with those not just on the spectrum, but sensory processing, neurodevelopmental delays, allergies, asthma, ADHD, kind of the whole spectrum of chronic childhood illness. And my background is as a molecular biologist, and I studied cell biology and genetics, so I'm a science geek. I love the biochemistry of the body, and I'm a nutritionist, so trained in nutrition, and also a holistic healer, so I've learned a bunch of different kind of energetic, informational healing methods, and I use that all together in my practice and see wonderful results with kids. But what I want to talk about today is the one crucial step that most people miss. And most practitioners, I'd say 90–95% of practitioners. And I'll give you a little story about that. I was in a MAPS training. That's a training for the Medical Academy of Pediatric Specialties. You can focus on neurodevelopmental issues in kids. And I sat next to this very prominent, well-known, successful autism doctor. And I leaned over, there was something in the presentation that reminded me of drainage, or they were talking about something, and I leaned over and I said, so what do you do for drainage? And he said, you know, I can't do everything. And so he didn't address that at all. And I thought, wow, and he's still getting, you know, recoveries from his kids, but I wanted to talk about how drainage can speed things up. And so what do I mean by drainage? Well, you know, if you think about in your kitchen or bathroom sink, you use water, and let's say you do the dishes. Maybe y'all have dishwashers now, but I still do dishes by hand. And you have your soapy water, and then you pull the plug or whatever, the drain, and it goes down the drain. It's draining. That's drainage, right? So when stuff builds up in the sink, like hair and other whatever, dust and debris, whatever it is, you can gradually have the pipes get covered and coated, and then this mesh of things, and all of a sudden you have a clog in your drain, right? So you don't have drainage. So I think a lot of our kids are kind of like that scenario. There's barely anything getting through the drain. It's a very slow water going down the drain. And so where does drainage start? You know, we think of drainage, we think of when we get things out of the body, we think of, you know, having bowel movements, pooping, and we think of urination, peeing. But drainage is so much more than that. And as you know, as you might know, if your child is constipated, and constipation meaning, you know, not going to the bathroom every day, or also having like little rabbit pellets, you know, little pellets, or, you know, just not a nice formed log. You can look at the Bristol poop scale to see what poop should look like. So if they're constipated, that stuff is sitting inside their body, and what happens is all the toxins and things, not all, but toxins that should be going out of their system are getting reabsorbed into the body through the, you know, when the water gets reabsorbed from the colon, which is something our body normally does, the toxins can get reabsorbed. So let me start, there's many levels of drainage, not many, but a few. And so I want to start at the most basic one, since I geek out on cell biology. No, but it starts in the cell. Everything kind of starts in the cell. And, you know, if you picture a cell, we have a lot of things inside there, right? We have the DNA that makes proteins. And what do our proteins do? Well, they can be a structure for the cell. They can be a structure for different things in our body, like muscles made of protein. And they can be enzymes that make biochemistry happen, right? That make neurotransmitters, for example, or that make digestive enzymes. So that stuff gets made in the cell, right? Proteins and other different things get made. And what happens at the end of a process? There's waste, right? So the waste has to go outside of the cell. So that's the first place we have drainage, right? From the inside of the cell to the outside of the cell. And then after that, the waste is in that space between the cells. It's called the extracellular matrix. That's where our collagen and elastin and other proteins are that like give our body structure. It's the scaffolding of our body, right? Around all our muscles, we have fascia, and that holds us together. So that's the space between the cells, the extracellular space. And we want the toxins, the wastes from the cell to move through that and into the lymph. The lymph parallels the blood vessels, right? We all kind of learned about the circulatory system in high school biology. Blood flows throughout the entire body, and it brings nutrients and oxygen to the cells, and it takes some waste away. But our lymphatic system is another way that we take waste away. It's the sewer system of the body. And that can be congested and clogged, much like the pipes in the sink that I talked about. And if that's clogged, you're not really moving things very well. You're not draining. So that's drainage. Now, what happens from the lymph? Where do those toxins go? Where does that waste go? Well, it gets dumped in the blood, carried to the liver, right? The liver's on the right side, right under your ribs. And the liver does a whole bunch of detox processes, and it spits those toxins into the bile, and the bile is stored in the gallbladder. And so all those toxins sit in the bile and the gallbladder, and then what they do is they go through the small intestine after we have a meal, right? Where our digestion is stimulated, our bile is stimulated. We have a meal, all those toxins and waste, and our food too, goes through the small intestine and then through the colon, and then it goes out in the feces. So if we are not pooping, it's not going out, it's getting recirculated. Another place of congestion can be the liver, because it's just so overwhelmed with so many toxins. And the gallbladder, again, same situation, very overwhelmed and just kind of stagnant. You know, picture like a murky pool of water that's kind of muddy and just not moving, little sludgy. That we can get like that in the gallbladder, sludgy, and that's congestion. Now, our other main areas that we eliminate, right, are the urinary system, right? Our kidneys help filter toxins out of the blood, and that goes out in the urine, and then our supposedly clean blood keeps circulating. Our skin, right? We have so much skin. It's one of our biggest detox organs. That's why sweating is so important. Sweating in a sauna or in the sun, or, you know, having our kids play, right, and get all sweaty playing tag and stuff. I remembered as a kid I did that. And so that's why it's important to move, right? The movement of the body also gets that lymph to flow. So that's really helpful. If our kids are sedentary, playing computer games all the time, or just like laying on the couch, and a lot of kids with autism are, because they don't have the energy, right? They don't have the energy to be really, really out there. And then some of our kids are really hyper and they move all the time. So just movement helps with that lymph flow. So I talked about the skin, and then the lungs. Our lungs are another way that we expire gases that we don't need, right? There's exchange that goes on in the lungs, and we get rid of toxin. Well, we get rid of waste, right? Carbon dioxide. That's a waste product of our cells. And so we breathe it out. And if you've ever noticed, if your child has really bad breath, it's good and bad. So one thing is, it's a good sign, because that means he's expiring or breathing out toxins. And the bad news is that there's a lot of toxins in him that he has to breathe it out through his lungs, or she. So what about drainage? How do we look at this? How do we know? How do you know if your child's draining or not? We go to our doctors, and they give you all these great supplements, these biomedical things, compounds, vitamin D, vitamin B12, vitamin C, CoQ10, all these great things. But what I find in my practice is a lot of times they're not getting in the child. Why is that? Because, things aren't draining out. So imagine if you didn't take your garbage out of your house for a year. What would that look like? Just, close your eyes for a second and imagine garbage all over your house, right? It's not going out. It's like our kids' bodies. And then you, let's say you go to the store and you get some food, or you get some toilet paper, and there's not an open way to walk to get to the refrigerator to put things in, or you can't really make it all the way to the bathroom to put the toilet paper there. So you just, it sits on the couch, right? Or at the front door, because things are clogged and not moving well. So I think this is the equivalent to what our kids' bodies look like. And so a lot of people, because we're not trained medically, the doctors, they know so much stuff, and they're really, really great at a lot of things, but they're not trained in drainage. You know, they're not trained to do that. They're not trained in necessarily in the holism of everything. Some are, you know, I'm not going to speak for everybody. So what we need to do is open these systems. How do we do that? Well, as I mentioned earlier, exercise, right? Moving the body, you know, moving the lymph. Our blood vessels have muscles that move the blood, but our veins and our lymph have these valves. So we, so gravity will kind of, like, imagine a tube in your leg, right, with a valve. So the valve stops the flow of the liquid from going further down, but we need to move to make that go, right? And our muscles squeeze. When we move our muscles squeeze the veins, our muscles squeeze the lymph. So, so that's really good to do any kind of exercise, movement, running, tag, playing, physical movement. Jumping on a trampoline, that's really great for the lymph. Or a rebounder. I know a lot of kids, a lot of families with kids with autism have trampolines. So get your kids jumping. Another thing you could do is lymph brushing. They have these, I have a bamboo brush. It's a little bit of a hard brush, but you just brush up your arm, up your leg, up your back, up your torso. And that's, again, like getting the lymph to flow to where it needs to go. It needs to all go in the, you know, dump in the heart. And then from there, it mixes with the blood and goes to the liver, right? And then we're going to detoxify. So that's something for the lymph. One of the things I use too is homeopathic remedies. Our kids tend to be very energetically sensitive. And so just that little nudge from the homeopathic remedy, like reminding the lymph how to be the lymph, can really help. So after the lymph, we have the liver. So there's things that will stimulate the liver, like herbs, like milk thistle and dandelion and burdock root and yellow dock. And these are bitter herbs. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Swedish bitters. It's a liquid made with, basically, it's a concoction of herbs. And what it does is it makes the liver contract and the gallbladder contract. And people, like in the old days in Europe, maybe 100 years ago, they probably had bitters with their, like dandelion and stuff with their food. But if they didn't, they would have this herbal concoction and like take a teaspoon of bitters. And as the name implies, it tastes very bitter. So I don't think we're going to get our kids to take bitters. We might not. But, you know, we know with all the picky eating, they might not like to take bitters to stimulate their liver. But herbs are really amazing for that. Now, I find some kids on the spectrum, the kids I work with tend to be too sensitive. They don't usually test well for herbs. And I just think it's kind of like, you know, it's a little bit like shouting in a library. You know, you just need a little whisper, but they're, you know, it's too much, too overwhelming for the system. So instead I use homeopathics for the liver as well, right? That's just going to gently stimulate. And we might use some supplements. So amino acids can be really great. Taurine is really good, methionine is really good, and inositol is really good. Those are really good for gallbladder, actually, to get that moving. So the liver and gallbladder are very connected. What happens is the liver does, it does all this detoxification work. It does other things too, but it does a lot of detoxification work. And where does it put all those toxins? It puts it in the bile. The bile, and it makes the bile. So it that's kind of like the trash bag, right? It squirts it into the gallbladder. If our gallbladder isn't moving, those toxins don't get squirted out and they just kind of back up. So we really want the liver and the gallbladder to be working together in conjunction. That's where the bitters come in. And that's where the taurine, methionine, and inositol come in. And that's pretty much what I like to use. Now, the liver does other things, and there's other supplements and other things that could help that, but I'm just talking strictly about drainage. And then we definitely want pooping to be happening. So magnesium is always good for that. I love the Global Healing Center magnesium hydroxide. It's called oxy powder. and that can really get things moving. Castor oil can really get things moving. It can be rubbed externally on the belly, and it can also be taken internally, you know, just as a liquid. I just talked to someone recently who said once they started taking castor oil for their daughter, that she just started pooping more regularly and they were well-formed bowel movements. So that can be really helpful as well. I hadn't really planned on talking about that stuff, but that is part of letting go. The kidneys, they filter a lot of heavy metals. So what I see when I work with clients is a lot of our kids have big loads of heavy metals, and they're different ones depending on where the child is, or I don't know what it depends on really, but I find lead, cadmium, mercury, arsenic, aluminum, thallium, I'm starting to find a lot. I think that's a gasoline additive, so we're breathing it in. Sometimes uranium and cesium, which are sort of radioactive, like strange ones that we don't really use commercially. And antimony and tin, I'm finding tin a lot. So these heavy metals, what they do is they get in and they just, it's kind of like throwing a wrench in the gears of an operating machine. They just kind of stop things up. And what they stop up are, you know, certain biochemical reactions that we don't want to have stopped up. And one of the things that stops up is detoxification. So we want to detoxify, but we've got a wrench in our gears, and then we get more toxins. So the kidneys are what will detoxify those heavy metals. And again, I use homeopathic remedies. There's also herbal stuff for that. And again, like I said, I find herbs a little too strong for some of our more sensitive kids. I don't find as much dysfunction in the skin, sometimes in the lung. For the lungs, I'll usually, I can usually kind of narrow it down to some kind of infectious agent, so bacteria, mycoplasma or something, maybe some autoimmunity. We can use certain killing agents, certain herbal things. I don't do that unless our drainage is open, right? Because what happens when you start killing things? When you start, imagine how you feel when you have the flu, right? You feel achy, your head hurts, you're hot, you feel really crappy all over your whole body. So these are the toxins that our microbes produce, right? And then let loose in our bodies. So if we're not draining, if we're not moving them through the lymph, if we're not moving them out the bowels or out the kidneys or out the skin by sweating or through our breath, then we're just congesting even more. So we really don't want to go on a killing spree until we're open up that drainage. And I think that that's what a lot of our really well-meaning practitioners do. They start killing things, and then you might see what's called a Herxheimer reaction or some kind of detox reaction because there's no place for those toxins to go. So they just kind of, you know, stay and move all around and create havoc. So that's why drainage is so important. I just want to summarize and recap a little bit. That drainage is getting things out of the body, getting waste products out of the body that we do every day, every second, and should be flowing. So drainage is flow of things out. Starts in the cell, well, maybe not starts, but I'm going to say for purposes of this, we're starting with inside the cell that does a lot of cellular respiration, cellular activities, and that needs to get rid of waste, the cell. It goes into that space between the cells, and it can get really stuck and clogged there. But we want it to be moving through. We want it to move through into the lymph. And again, if the lymph is congested, it's not going to be flowing. So we want to flow from the lymph through, and then it'll meet with the blood, dump into the blood at the heart, and then go into the liver. Detoxification happens. That all those toxins go into the bile, into the gallbladder, which is right next to the liver, get stored there until they're ready to be released through the intestines and then out in the feces. And then our blood is also filtered. Toxins are filtered out through the kidneys, through the breath, and also through the skin. So sweating is great. If you see rashes, eczema, psoriasis, these kinds of things in your kids, it's a sign that the digestion is blocked, that the liver and gallbladder need some attention. Let's see. Yeah, I think the main thing I want to say is that I use homeopathics for almost everything because I don't want to put a bunch of supplements in until I see kids are draining out. The other thing I use is neuromodulation technique because that's what I do. And neuromodulation, just really briefly, is to assess, let's say I'll assess the lymph. How congested is it? We ask certain questions to find that out. And we use muscle testing with the body to ask those questions and have the body give us answers. So if you're not familiar with muscle testing, if you're in with a practitioner, you'll put the person being tested will put their arm out and then either resist or go weak, depending on the question. So we might hold a compound. Let's say I know I'm allergic to a peanut and I hold it in my hand. I would go really weak because that's not, my body's telling me, hey, this is a problem. So we use muscle testing to ask the body questions, to ask the subconscious mind questions, and then find out where the dysfunction is. So let's say the lymph is congested, we can ask a bunch of questions about that and find out what would be a good remedy to resolve that. And with NMT, also give an instruction to say, hey, you know, you're doing ABC, but you really should be doing XYZ. Would you rather do that? Because I can give you an instruction on how to do that. And so the NMT gives the body the instruction on how to do that. So I use NMT a lot to open up the drainage from the cellular level all the way to the big system-wide level. And like I said, I also use homeopathics, and I will use some supplements depending on, everyone's different, so it really depends on what someone presents with, what we find in the body, what dysfunction's there. But what I find when you really address drainage first, you start to see the letting go of things. I hear about smelly poops. I hear about really stinky urine and bad breath. And so I think that what we need to be doing is having our kids have more of these excretions. As gross as it sounds, we need to get them to drain. And once they start draining more, you can put the good nutrients in and they'll actually use them better. You know, just one thing I'm finding too is that when you put the good nutrients in, minerals are so important. I mean, magnesium's a big one, but really, like, our kids, I think we are too, so deficient in good minerals. So, you know, to get your child on a good multi-mineral can be really helpful, even as part of that drainage. And if you put your child on a multi-mineral and you start seeing hyper or like worse activity, what that's telling you is those good minerals are displacing the heavy metals or the bad minerals. So you want to back it down and go a lot slower, because you don't want to just like throw everything off at once, like, you know, get all those metals going off the cells and proteins and tissues at once, right? Because it's creating a reaction. You want to go a lot slower. But minerals can be a real big key for helping to get things off and getting them out of the body. And then once we get our systems moving and working a little bit better, it's kind of like, you know, this positive spiral up. Everything can happen better. We can get more toxins out. We can drain better. And then we can bring in more nutrients, and then we can build, you know, we see kids grow. We see kids become more alert, more cognitively able to handle things. Speech improves. You know, they're putting 3, 4, 5, 10 word sentences together. They're more present. So, you know, this is what we want to see, and we really need to get the drainage going. So hopefully I've talked about drainage. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them in, or you can email me at luminara@autismtransformed.com, but I'll see your Facebook messages. And what I wanted to say too is that I do these detox systems assessments for kids. So I'll look at the lymph, the kidney, the gallbladder, etc., those things that I mentioned, and look at how efficiently they're working. And if they're not, which, you know, I kind of find most of the time, to some degree or another, then I just recommend what's going to help them. And so if you want to sign up for that, I will put a link down below for how to do a detox systems assessment with me and get your child draining. And if you have a practitioner that you trust and you love working with, please, go in and say, hey, I heard about drainage, and I heard about, maybe I need to open my child's lymph or kidneys or liver or gallbladder, and can you help me with that? Or can you suggest someone who can help me with that? Because, I feel like sometimes when people come to me, by the time they become my client, they've been to so many doctors and they've done so many things, and this is the one thing they haven't done. Usually there's other things maybe they haven't done, but this is kind of a key. And just to let you know, I work at a distance too, and if you have any questions about that, you could type that in too, but we can do it over Skype. It's not a problem, or some video call. And I really hope to help as many kids as I can. Even if you never see me, please address drainage, because this will get you much further down the road much quicker. So thanks for listening. Appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.